I have a private student, and during our online sessions, we look at her own personal I Ching consultations. We look at the trigrams, hexagrams, lines, and also at the text of the I Ching. And during one of the last sessions, we discussed a hexagram with multiple moving lines, and we also looked at the text of these multiple moving lines. And I thought, this is an interesting case that might be worth sharing with my audience, with you. So my student is from Belgium, so she used the Dutch version of Wilhelm's I Ching translation, and since my videos are in English, I thought, well, let's look up the English version of Wilhelm. And when I saw the English translation, I thought there's something not quite right. There's something, that you have this feeling that something is going on here, and nothing really serious. But I thought, well, let's also look up the German original. And from there, I started a whole path and research trajectory, which actually didn't really have an end, but I had to stop somewhere. Otherwise, I would never make this video, because this video is actually about the things that I found when I was researching the original Chinese text of the I Ching, and the things that you can run into when you're examining this text. So I made a presentation for it, but I'm not really sure where this is all going. The idea of the video is mainly to show you how difficult it can be to translate the I Ching, because translations can give you a completely different view of the I Ching, and can give you the impression that it is relatively easy to translate the I Ching. Translations often tell you, well, this is what the text means, this is what it says, and you think, oh, well, no, that sounds plausible. But there are so many choices that you have to make, so many issues that you have to resolve and to consider when you want to translate the I Ching. And well, I just want to show you what you can encounter when you translate one simple character from the I Ching. What makes the I Ching difficult to translate and to find its proper meaning or setting is that in every way it is a unique book. You can't really compare it to any other ancient Chinese book. And Kidder Smith wrote an article about this, and he titled it "The Difficulty of the I Ching," but I think it should be plural, difficulties of the I Ching, because there's so many issues that you have to work with when you translate the I Ching. So just going to read part of his article. He says that, to begin with, the I Ching discourages readers from viewing it as history in the manner of the Shujing, the book of history, or the Chunqiu, which is also a book from the Warring States period, with historical anecdotes. There are only scraps of storyline and never an identifiable speaking voice or someone addressed. The Yi, in other words, lacks narrator, and an implicit audience. Anything that might identify a human voice or persona. And that is true. It does. You're not really sure who is speaking. There isn't an author mentioned, nor is it clear from the text what kind of audience the text is trying to address. In all these ways, the Yi stands at considerable remove from the oral traditions so evident in the Shujing, and indeed in almost every other Pichin writing. There are no disputes, no speeches, no great deeds. In terms of time and place, it consistently omits references to a locatable here or now. For example, instead of saying over there from us, it says losing a sheep in Yi. Can also be plural, losing sheep, not a sheep, but sheep, the multiple sheep in Yi. Instead of saying 3 days after today, it says 3 days after the Ja day. A spoon is lost, a head is wet, and certain things are judged auspicious without fault or leading to remorse. That is all. By all these standards, the I Ching may be judged the quintessential written text. Pure residue, bereft of context, syntax, voice, and intentionality. However, he says, the Yi does share one key feature with the Yijing, the book of poetry. Both texts have been read figuratively as consisting of images that, when properly understood, reveal a significance greater than the literal meaning of their words. Figurative readings of the Yi, rather than resolving issues of indeterminacy, simply shift the interpretive process to a more familiar realm, one no more systematically governable than any other aspect of the text. But the category poetry is still useful to our investigation of the year's literature, since it was initially through poetry that modernists greatly expanded the possibilities of language. Modernists, that is what Kidde Smith is the word that Kidde Smith and other authors use for those who don't follow the traditional interpretation of the I Ching but take a completely new course and disregard any older ideas like from Confucianism, etc., and they look at the text on its own and using all modern resources and often a more Western approach to discern the meaning of the text. Because of these developments, the language of the I Ching no longer looks so peculiar to us. That's true. When you look at the I Ching as related to poetry using images, then suddenly the text becomes more familiar because poetry is something that we know. But as Kidder rightfully says, this familiarity highlights our difference from the ancient Chinese. Because the I Ching looks like something we already know, poetry, but not like anything else they ever knew, then the more we understand the I in our terms, the less we do in theirs. So that is the issue that you have when you look at the I Ching. The minute you label the text in a certain way, that label that determines how you will translate and view and interpret the text. So if you say that it is related to poetry, then suddenly that becomes the lens through which you will view the I Ching, and that choice has consequences. So and that is probably one of the reasons why sinologists don't really like to work with the I Ching, because it doesn't really they can't connect it to anything that they learn from in their studies at college, at universities, etc. Because colleges where you learn to read classical Chinese, they mainly look at texts from Confucianism or maybe Taoism. But texts like the I Ching, they are not really being examined. So, and the reason for that is that the book is so weird when it comes to its contents. So it's not a history book. Is it a book of poetry? Well, it might be in some way, because there are certain aspects in the text that certain lines that are in rhyme. So it looks like poetry sometimes, but a large part doesn't look like poetry. So what is it? That's the problem that sinologists have with the I Ching. So Anyway, let's look at the text that I examined with my student. And she cast hexagram 16 with multiple moving lines, but the line that I want to focus on is the fourth line of hexagram 16. Where are we? Yes, there we are. So you have the Chinese text, and that's over here. And below that, you have the English translation from Wilhelm. And there's something that I noticed when I looked at that translation and compared it to the German original. So the English translation says the source of enthusiasm. He achieves great things, doubt not. You gather friends around you as a hair clasp gathers the hair. And I thought that's not a literal translation of the German original. Here it says he achieves great things, whereas Wilhelm says erreicht Großes. There is no things in it. And a more literal translation of the German version would be he achieves greatness. And that, to me, doesn't have the same kind of meaning as the English translation. I know that I might be nitpicking here, but it's especially these kind of details that can determine how you read a translation. So the English version says, you gather friends around you, whereas the German original says, die Freunde, friends, gather around you like around a hair clip. Haarspange, that's a hair clip. So here in the English version, the text is more active. You gather friends. Whereas in the German original, emphasis is being put on the friends. So although the idea is the same about friends gathering around you, with the English version, it is something that you do, something that you actively do. Whereas with the German original, it's the friends that from their own initiative gather around you. And that might determine how you view the text. So, well, this isn't really something serious. I mean, the idea is still the same. The image of the text is still the same. But I found this weird. So I thought, let's look at the Chinese original. And I mainly want to focus on this character, which is the character Zhan, which in Wilhelm's translation is translated as a hair clasp. Is that the best translation? Well, let's see. And one of the first things that I always do is I go to the Hanyu Datsuren dictionary, which is actually this dictionary here, but I also have it electronically as a PDF, which is very easy. It saves you a lot of time. And the Hanyu Datsuren dictionary says that this character, the main meaning, which starts here, there, is the meaning of a hairpin. It also shows an image of it, and that is used to keep the hair together. And most of these meanings that you see here have to do with some kind of ornament for the to keep your hair together. It also says that the initial meaning is that of a hairpin, but later on it became a more general term for ornaments that you put in your hairs, like, for instance, a hair clasp. But that's not the original oldest meaning of the character. So, but there was one meaning which I found interesting here, which is actually listed there, because it gives another character here, which means quick or swiftly, fast. And it quotes the fourth line from the I Ching there as an example in which that meaning is being used. And I thought that's interesting. And even more interesting was that it quotes Wang Bi. There we have Wang Bi. And in his commentary, he says that this character for hairpin actually means this character, which means swift. It's with the character G. So I thought that's interesting. Let's see what Richard Lin has to say about this, because Richard Lin translated Wang Bi's I Ching commentary, and he says about the character or the sentence. He says the character ge, which is actually the character that precedes the character for hairpin. He says, and translates as why not. In other words, surely. Here should be read as ge, form or come together, and zan, the character for hairpin, hair clasp here in Lin's translation, means G, quickly. This is what Wang Bi says. Zan, hair clasp, means G, quickly. And Richard Lin adds as a note to that another rarely seen character, also pronounced zan, has this zan from the I Ching as the phonetic and the show, the hand, significant as on the left side. It means quickly. Yeah, that's not entirely correct. Not that it really matters, but the character that Lin is referring to is actually this character. But then it misses the bamboo part that we actually have in the original character there, that top part over there, that is missing in the character that is actually used by Jin Fang. But anyway, the meaning is indeed quickly. And he says both Changyi and Zhu Xi, they gloss Zan, the hair clasp, as Ju, gather, come together. And since they do not mention Ge, the character before Zan, this implies that they read ge as it stands. Thus, their reading of this part of the Yang would be something like, if no one harbors suspicion, why should not a friendly association come together? And he says, well, that's in the Zhao Yi Zedong edition, which is the palace edition that Wilhelm and Legge and other missionaries also use. The Zhao Yi Zedong edition contains the complete commentaries of Zhu Xi and Changyi. But these versions, these books from Zhu Xi and Changyi have also been translated. He says, Lin says that Changyi and Zhu Xi gloss it as such. And when I read something like that, I always think, did they really say that? So I doubt almost every text, every translation. And so I always try to trace the sources. So when Lin says that Changyi and Zhu Xi explain the character like this and that, then I think, well, okay, let's look that up. And let's start with Zhu Xi's Zhao Yi Benyi, which has been translated by Adler. And Joseph Adler says, translates this passage from Zhu Xi's Zhao Yi Benyi. He says that indeed Zhu Xi says that Zan, a character for hairpin, means together. And he adds to that, it also means quick. So That immediately changes slightly what Lin is saying, because Lin is saying here that Changyi and Juxi gloss, however, Changyi and Juxi gloss Zhan as together, come together. That's true, but Juxi also says that it means quick. So he doesn't only say that it means together, not together, but together. And Adler adds as a note to that the root meaning of Zhan is hairpin, which gathers the hair. Juxi gives these definitions because Zhan is a fairly uncommon character. I thought that's an interesting addition, an interesting note, because how does Adler know the intention of Juxi? How does he know that this is the reason why Juxi gave these additional meanings, these definitions? It is true that Zhan is not a very often occurring character in Chinese text, but saying that Juxi gives these definitions because Zhan is a fairly uncommon character, I think that's an interesting assumption. So anyway, this is about Juxi's text. Adler is a sinologist. He's trained in the field of Chinese, classical Chinese, and well, he knows how to translate a Chinese classical text. That is a little bit different from Michael Harrington, who is not trained in classical Chinese. And Harrington translated Cheng Yi's commentary to the I Ching, the Yi River commentary on the Book of Changes. And you can immediately see the difference between someone who is trained in classical Chinese, who had proper education when it comes to that, and someone who, well, actually is on the same level as me. I'm not trained in classical Chinese either, but throughout the years I have learned how to decipher classical Chinese, and I'm familiar with certain patterns and often occurring phrases, and the grammar I learned to recognize. So, but I'm still an amateur, just like Michael Harrington is. And it shows in his translation of Cheng Yi's I Ching commentary, because he really makes some weird choices. It immediately starts with his translation of the fourth line of Hexcom 16. He says it is without doubt its friends team up and it clasps them. What on earth is it? I mean, it is without doubt its friends team up and it clasps them. He's turning character Zhan into a verb, clasp. And yeah, but I mean, you can't say it is wrong, but it's just a weird translation of this text. And this simple paragraph, I have so many issues with it. If we look at the rest of his translation, he says the fourth line occupies the position of the great minister. He says the great minister, but the term Dachen there, that most often refers to multiple ministers. It's just a term for ministers in high position. And saying that it is position of the great minister, that seems to imply that there's only one great minister, but that was never the case. I think either you translate Dachen as the position of great ministers, or if you want to do it correctly, which is also fine, make it a. That's an a. A great minister. It occupies the position of a great minister, which from an I Ching perspective makes sense if you look at the single yang line, which occupies the fourth position in the hexagram. So it's a great minister. I would be fine with that translation, but not the great minister, because there were more Dachshunds. It serves a soft and weak ruler, and it faces command over the world. What the hell? Faces command? That is not a proper translation of this, where are we? This character, because that character means to serve in a certain position. It does not mean faces command. That I don't know where he gets that from. But it means that you have a certain official position. But the really weird part is the really weird part in his translation is his translation of these two characters. He says it faces command over the world, which is a terrain of peril and doubt. Actually, the yellow part is that's this sentence. The first two characters mean that peril, danger, and doubt. But the last two characters there, not the last two characters, I mean the there, that means position, located at. There are so many classical Chinese texts in which this combination is being used, and it's used as a reference to a position, being located somewhere. So he translates it literally, which is a terrain, because D means earth, terrain if you want. So that character. So, but anyone who is trained in classical Chinese would never, in this sentence, translate it literally as terrain, because it refers to position. This whole paragraph is about position. We have here Zwei, which is position, and this character also has to do with position. Zdi also refers to position. It's located all at the position of either the fourth line in the hexagram or the position of danger, whatever. But translating it as terrain, you can immediately see that this is not a translation by someone who has studied classical Chinese. And he says that it is proper that those above delegate command only to it. I'm really struggling with that sentence, also because this word only is at such a weird position in the sentence. It is proper that those above delegate command only to it. But what it actually says here is that those above rely on it. They are dependent on it. So the fifth line, which is this weak yin king or ruler, is relying on the strong minister at the fourth line. But this relying on it, that's totally not found in Harrington's translation. So, and that's only about this paragraph, which I initially didn't even want to use in my presentation, but I've had so many problems with his translation, and the same goes for the part that I actually wanted to use in this presentation, which is about the word zan for hairpin. And he says, he translates Cheng Yi's text as the word clasps refers to a gathering. But when you see a construction like this in a text, you have, you can disregard the comma because it's not in the Chinese original, but anyway, you have one character and then it is followed by another character and the character ye, which is more or less a sentence final. It means that the first character is being read as the second character. So all Cheng Yi is trying to say is that, well, this character zan, I read it as that, which means gathering. So And saying that the word clasps refers to a gathering, that's not the best translation for what Cheng Yi is trying to say here. Cheng Yi is simply trying to say, you know, this character A means character B. That's it. So, and then Harrington says, it is called clasp from the clasp that chooses and gathers some of the hair. How on earth can a clasp choose something? Clasps, the objects don't choose something. So, which is a really weird translation of this character choose, because the most basic meaning of that character is to take or to fetch. So the phrase that is actually used here means to fetch and gather hair, and not chooses. I know that choose is another meaning of choose, but it doesn't fit the context here. So, and this is so much different from Atlas' translation of Chuxi's Jiao Yi Ben Yi. Well, Adler, he reviewed Harrington's book, and he wasn't really kind about Harrington's translation. But I must agree with Adler when he says that there are numerous choices made by the translator that can only be called bizarre. And you can find his translation on the internet on Atlas' own website. When he wrote his review, Harrington replied to that, and Adler again replied to Harrington's reply. So, which led to a very interesting short debate between someone who is scholar in classical Chinese and someone who isn't. So I'm very cautious to use Harrington's translation because of these simple examples that I mention here. So, but anyway, this actually digressing from the point that I'm actually trying to make in this whole presentation. Let's look at the variant texts, the excavated text of the fourth line of hexagram 16, because that's what I always do when I look at a line from the I Ching. I always look at the excavated versions of the text. And here we have the received version of the text. Then we have the second line is the Mawang Dui version of the Jiao Yi. And then the last line is the Shanghai Museum manuscript. So in this version, which is from Nai Van Gao's book, which is an excellent book. If you want to know everything about what has been written about these excavated texts, I actually have it here. That's this book from Nai Van Gao. There's so much information about every line from mainly from the Shanghai Museum manuscript. So much information, and this is just an extremely small section of it. What you have to keep in mind, though, and we will see that in the next slides, is that what he gives here is a transcription of the original Chinese character. It's not the exact version, it's how they chose, in this case, to transcribe the original character, but there are other options possible. What Nai Van Gao does is give all possible, gathered researches on this line from the I Ching, and he also quotes the Jingyan Shuwen from Lu Deming from the Tang Dynasty, which is what a lot of researchers do, because Lu Deming seems to have had access to a lot of different versions of the I Ching with all kinds of commentaries. And what is interesting is what Lu Deming says about the character Zhan for hairpin, he says that the Zhixia Chuan, which is attributed to Zhixia, which is a student from Confucius, he says that it uses the same character, but interprets it as Yi for swift, quickly. And Zheng Xuan says also that the character means this, which also means swift or quickly or fast. Another version, the Guwen, says Lu Deming uses this character. Jingfang uses this character. Ma Rong uses this character. And Xun, I think, I'm not sure which author that actually is, uses this character. And Yufan uses this character, which actually is being read as get together, to assemble together. So suddenly we have several versions of the same character. And that makes studying the I Ching so interesting and also so difficult, because if there are so many commentaries and versions of the I Ching that give so many different characters, I mean, you could write complete dissertations about each of these variant characters, all of each of these interpretations. By the way, this doesn't mean that there are 7 different versions of the I Ching. When you see a text that says this with yeah at its end, it often means that the character is interpreted, the original character is interpreted like that. It doesn't mean that there is an I Ching version which actually has this character. It means that it is the character Zhan is being interpreted like that. But what is interesting here is that of all these different versions of the character, all these variants, all these interpretations, is that there are 4 which all have the same meaning, or at least the same field of meanings. These 4 all mean fast or sudden, quick. And I found that interesting, because suddenly you get the idea that this meaning of hairpin is clearly not the only meaning that early authors saw in at that specific spot in the text of the I Ching. So I looked up this Shanghai Museum version, because that's what you always have to do. You shouldn't accept at face value that this is what is at the position in the manuscript. That is just a transcription. You should always try to look up the original. And the original version in the Shanghai Museum manuscript is actually something that looks like that. And so many studies have been made about this character. And you can see here that I'm not going to go through all this this text, and then you can simply look up this. I think it's a dissertation. It should be. Yeah, you can download it here. I mentioned the reference here. You can download it, and it's a quite extensive discussion of the different versions of the I Ching. Anyway, what it says is that it can be transcribed like that, but there are also other researchers, scholars, who translate it or transcribe it like that. But what I found interesting is that it says that this character also occurs in the Guodian text from the Zhiyi text. So the text, this character doesn't only occur in the Jiaoyi, but we also find it in other texts, although with a little bit difference, because the top part that you see here, which is that the little, whoops, the roof part here on this character, which is from the Zhiyi, the Guojian Zhuyi, that is actually missing here in the Zhaoyi version. But anyway, the character comes pretty close. So, and this is where you can see it in the original manuscript. That's the Zhuyi manuscript. Anyway, Scott Cook translated the Guojian texts, and he says about this specific character that it is. If you want to read all this, just pause the video. I'm just going to go through the main points here. It is most of the time being read like this, Zong, being follow, or it's also used at the beginning of sense of originating from. That's what it can mean. So it leads to something, but the main basic meaning is that of to follow. And that is also how Scott Cook chooses to transcribe this this character. So, well, this is in the Zhuyi manuscript, but suppose we use this meaning for the Zhaoyi, which is plausible, I think. You get the meaning of a hairpin, but you get this meaning of follow. So instead of friends that are gathering like a hairpin, you get friends that gather and follow, which to me seems not like such a bad idea for this line of the I Ching. So, Lai Guolong wrote a whole article about this character, and he says about it that it should probably be translated as yeah, or another version of that. And he says that the connection between yeah and zong, as we have seen it in the Zhuyi text from Guojian, was the result of phonetic assimilation. But as he clearly shows in this article, is that there is a link between zong and yeah. However, in the table that he gives in his article, you can see that in all the versions that we have of this character, in all the different texts in which this character is being used, which means Shanghai Museum manuscripts, as well as the Guojian text and a few other texts, that character is constantly being read like this. So in this table disagrees with, to some extent, with Scott Cook, who reads it as the character zong, to follow. But this table says that in most cases the character is being read like that, which means G, quick and fast. So the Zhuyi text is a text that we already know. It is a text from the Luyi, and the current version is what it says here, uses zong. So this means that this character from the Guojian text in the current text of Zhuyi is being read as zong, to follow. So I found that really interesting, because this turns the text from the I Ching in a completely different direction. So, and this book contains all the versions of the character in Shanghai Museum manuscripts, and also shows some other books. And what I found interesting in this dictionary, because that's what it actually is that it isn't really deciding on how to transcribe that character, because we have here the sentence from the I Ching, the fourth line of the I Ching, and the last character is here transcribed as that. But the sentence is repeated with another character, and in that sentence it is suddenly being described like this. So the authors of this dictionary aren't really sure on how to transcribe the Shanghai Museum version of this character. Well, anyway, that's what I found interesting. But here you can also read that the character is being read as Feng. Well, this book from Gao Naifang, it contains so many pages on this character alone. And of course, there is a lot of repetition here because Gao Naifang, he quotes a lot of other authors and he quotes them completely. And a lot of these authors, they refer to the Jingyan Shuwen from Lu Deming. So you have several paragraphs in which the Jingyan Shuwen from Lu Deming is being mentioned. So there's a lot of repetition, but it's still a very complete exploration of this character and all the research that has been done about it. And what I found interesting is the conclusion that he gives, because he gives so many different explanations for this character Zhan. But at the end, he says, well, you know, all these authors who don't read it as a hair clasp, hairpin, they might be wrong. And I thought, well, that's an interesting conclusion. You've given all these explanations from different authors, different scholars who give you a different perspective on this character, and still you come to the conclusion, well, it's probably still a hairpin. And he refers to the work from Zhang Binghe for that, who was a really late contemporary author. So anyway, I could go on and on with exploring the Shanghai Museum manuscript character, and I didn't even bother to look at the Ma Wangdui character, which is completely different character, because at some point you just have to stop. But I was interested to see how other translators would look at this line and what they said about this character Zhan and what their view on this character actually is. So I looked up a few translations, and I didn't really choose. I chose a few random translations, and the first one that I actually want to start with is the translation from Lars Bo Christensen, because there are so many things in his translation that I think, well, you could have been a little bit more precise here, regardless of how I think he translates the actual line from the I Ching. I hardly agree with his translation, but what he adds to that as commentary, it needs a little bit more refinement, I think. He says about the character Zhan that the Hanyu Dat Zhejian says it means hairpin joined together. The Hanyu Dat Zhejian, that's the dictionary there that starts here. That's the largest dictionary, Chinese dictionary that exists. And Lars uses that dictionary really a lot. If I read his translation, he constantly refers to that book, which is in itself, it's fine, but sometimes he seems to stick mainly to that dictionary. He says that both Cargren, because this here is a reference to Cargren's Grammata Syriaca Recensa, they assume the meaning quick from the Jiaoyi itself and give no other examples. And I thought, is that true? Because Cargren, in his Grammata Syriaca Recensa, he says that the character means quick, rapid, and here you see that he refers to the yi. Yeah, his translation of this character, you can get the impression that he refers to the I Ching for the meaning of quick, rapid, but more about that later. Lars says that the Hanyu Datsuryan assumes the meaning quick from the Jiaoyi itself, and I looked up what the Hanyu Datsuryan actually says about this character, and there's an electronic version of the Hanyu Datsuryan, which probably is highly illegal. But so if it's still there, it's very convenient because it saves you so much time. But what the Hanyu Datsuryan actually says about the meaning for quick, it does not really get it from the Zhaoyi itself, as Lars says. It gets it from Wang Bi's commentary, which is not the same. So the meaning for quick, as we've seen earlier with the Hanyu Datsuryan, the single character dictionary, the meaning is from Wang Bi's commentary. It's not from the I Ching, but it's from Wang Bi's commentary. So also that meaning for rapid, quick can be found in other texts as well. As we've seen before, Jingfang uses this character, which also means quick and rapid. So Lars seems to dismiss this meaning of rapid and quick simply because it only occurs in the Hanyu Datsuryan with a reference to the I Ching. But there are other versions who also use this character, and as we have seen by now, the Shanghai Museum manuscript also uses a character which is transcribed with that specific meaning. So there's so much more to be said than what the Hanyu Datsuryan tell you about it and what Kargan says about it. And also he says about this meaning of joined together, it's taken from an example where a gown or jacket is joined in the front. And he says this was done with the fibula, which resembles a hairpin. So this definition in the dictionary is not really enough to say that Zhan means anything but hairpin. Well, that might be true, but as we have seen, there are other texts which do use, or at least read, the character Zhan with this meaning. That is what we have seen with the other versions that are mentioned by Lu Deming in his Jingjian Xuan. So it seems to me that Lars is mainly sticking to Hanyu Datsuryan definitions of this character, but there's a lot more to be said about the meaning of this character. And what he is definitely wrong about is when he says that the Shanghai Museum version has the same character. But that's not true because we have seen that the Shanghai Museum version has this character. So I'm not sure why he's saying that the Shanghai Museum version has the same character, because that's definitely not true. So he says that Kargren assumes the meaning quick from the Jiaoyi itself. And that's true for his Grammatica Syriaca Recensa, but in his lone character book, which is also a dictionary, he has a lot more to say about that. So he actually gives more explanation and information about why he reads it with the meaning of quick. And it can actually be summarized here. He says that if Wang Bi and Cheng Xuan had the best text, their interpretation can be supported by the Mozi, in which he says that the character is being read as quick. So this idea of quick for the meaning of Zhan, that is supported by other texts as well. So yeah, so if you only look at the Grammatica Syriaca Recensa from Kargan, then I think then you're limiting yourself, because there's so much more to be said about the view of Cargan on this character. So I also looked at a few other translations, like from Margaret Pearson. She translates it as the last part as friends gather as a hairpin gathers long hair. And she also gives a translation of the Mawang Dway text, which has a character that can be translated as slender, which is also an interesting take on the text. Legge completely dismisses the hairpin or hair clasp. He reads it in the way that Zhu Xi also read the text, with this idea of friends gathering around him. And Richard Kunst, in his quite modernist translation, has a completely different take on the text, because he reads the character for friends, he reads it as money, as cowries, and the character ge, for what is most of the time being read as together, is being read in its most original meaning as why. And the gathering is more or less interpreted as string. So this whole sentence becomes why not string the cowries, which is not something I personally agree with, but anyway. By now we have seen that this simple character Zhan can have different meanings, which brings you, or at least most readers, to the question, what is it? What does Zhan actually mean in this text? Is it swift, quickly? Does it mean gather or follow? That's also an option. Or is it still a hairpin? You know, what makes it difficult to make a choice here is that this meaning of swift and quickly can be found in the hexagram. If you use the hexagram as a supportive means to substantiate the meaning of quickly, well, you can find it in the hexagram, because the upper trigram thunder is associated with things that are quick, that are fast. So this idea of swift and quickly can actually be found in the hexagram itself. But the same goes for the hairpin. I mean, this hairpin is literally at the fourth line. It's the single young line in the hexagram. And as Adam Schwartz notes, but he was not the first to note that, he says that the fourth line in the received version has the image of a double strand of cowries together on a hairpin. That is more or less following Richard Kunst's translation. And the phrase occurs exactly at the sole young line in the picture, and the image is pictographic. The interpretation goes that line 4 is the hairpin, and the cowries, represented by the 3 lines, are strung on it. Yeah, I'm not sure if that I think that's a more modernist interpretation of it, but anyway, the hairpin is literally at line 4. This makes sense because the image is similar to hexagram 8, strung up fish. And it, fish, is it 8 hexagram both? 23, I'm not sure, whatever. It fits neatly into our hanging or falling down type of image set. The image of a hairpin is in early script is perhaps most recognizable in the graph used to write the yen pretty woman. In Orcabone script, the word is written, well, like that, and depicts a kneeling woman with a pin through her hair. And the hairpin looks just like the number 1 and resembles the divinatory form of 9. So the hairpin is also still a plausible translation of Zhan. If you want to connect the text to the hexagram, well, then this is the way to do it. Adam actually refers to the work of Xiangbing Ge, and Xiangbing Ge indeed explains it as the fourth line as a hairpin that gathers the hair. So, but another more hypothetical translation or view is also possible, because this phrase from the Zhao Yi, as actually these 2 characters here, the last two characters in the sentence. As we have seen now, the first character is being read as ge, which means together, to assemble. And the last character, Zan, as we have seen in the Guodian text, that can also be associated with Zong, to follow. And which leads us to this idea of an alliance, and this whole idea of alliance as connected to the character Zong is being explored by Nyenhauser, who was the editor of the Grand Scribe's Record, and you can find it in, actually I should have mentioned which volume, I think it's volume 1. And he says, well, first we believe that Zong originally meant ally or alliance, and that is something that I can also relate to the fourth line of hexagram 16, because it talks about friends, the original meaning also being that of alliances. So this is the problem that you can have when you look at the Chinese original text. So this idea of alliance is more or less reminiscent of Zhu Xi's interpretation of this line, because Zhu Xi actually says friends and associates will gather and follow you. So this idea of following, which we have also seen in the Guodian texts, which uses this certain character, that idea can also be connected to this line from the I Ching. So so many options, so many choices, which makes translating the I Ching, if you want to read a definitive translation, can be really hard. So anyway, there's a portion from a chapter from a book about the history of the I Ching around the world, and that actually deals with this problem. And the author, I think, let me check. I wrote it down because I'm going to read all this for you, whether you like it or not. This is the art. It's actually from Cheng, the chapter re-examining the English translation of the I Ching, and it's in the book with the title "The Making of the Global I Ching in the Modern World." Okay, so that's the author, Cheng, and where were we? Oh yeah, this is where we were. So. And Chung says that for most translators, dealing with a word that carries more than one meaning, as we have seen here, is to select a linguistic equivalent based on their knowledge of philology as well as the original text. The process of selection is guided by the ultimate goal of distinguishing the correct and the incorrect. I think that is what most translators will try to do, to find out what is the correct meaning of a character and what is what are incorrect meanings of a text. For instance, once a translator accepts the Shanghai Museum bamboo slip version of the I Ching, in which hexagram 48 Jing is written as character for well with water, instead of simply the character for well, two different versions, we are here now, in the received version, he or she definitely may translate the hexagram as well, a well, based on the hieroglyphic form of the character. However, if we refer to the line judgment of the beginning line at the bottom, Jiujing Wu Qin, and at the same time consult Wang Yinzhi's Jingyi Shuwen, disquisitions on the meanings of the classics heard from my father, the word Jing refers to Jing, a well, and to Jing, a trap, simultaneously. So one character refers to two different meanings. Therefore, in this case, it is not appropriate to say that one is correct, while the other is incorrect, because one character is used with two meanings. This is a typical example of polysemy, the coexistence of several possible meanings for a word. This example shows the importance of understanding the polysemic meanings of words as a major task in the process of reading and interpretation. Yeah, that's definitely something that you have to keep in mind, that in Chinese, one word can have different meanings, especially when you look at the variant text, as we have done so far. Essentially, translation is a reinterpretation of the original text rather than a simple replacement of its language with another that supposedly captures the original verbal meanings. A translation that involves much interpretation entails two major challenges. The first is to engage effectively with the multiplicity of meanings of words, which is a major characteristic of Chinese linguistics. The second is to distinguish accurately various kinds of Iwen, variant characters, same words written in different forms. Some of these variations should be read as et, alternate forms carrying the same or similar sound and meaning, while some should be read as different characters with the same phonetic structure. In order for translators to do their job properly and accurately, they must become familiar with the Chinese linguistic context of the words and phrases of the original text. And I think he's right about that. If you want to translate the I Ching, you have to consider all the possible meanings and variants, especially from the old texts that exist. So, and he continues that to say that the I Ching is creative philosophical work. Not entirely sure about that, but anyway, with a delicately designed system of meanings, where there is a core meaning on the one hand and many extended associated meanings on the other. Together, they form an organic structure which may be regarded as a cohort of meanings, in which the fluidity of interpretations is not only possible but also required. So what Cheng is saying here is that you should not only stick to one meaning, but there's this whole field of meanings that has to be considered when you look and or when you read the I Ching. In the nexus of the Gua, the hexagram, the Yao, the lines, and the Zi, the words, this fluidity has two characteristics. The first is the philosophical coherence supported by a linguistic structure based on the hieroglyphic form of the character and the audible sound. So you look at the shape of the character, the components in it, but you also have to look at the sound of the character. In the theory of the Hermeneutics circle, the philological context of the text serves not only as a medium transmitting the original meaning assigned by the author to the reader, but also an abstract self-contained meaning system embedded within the articulation with words, phrases, and sentences. Hence, reading is a critical intellectual activity that is related to understanding, which entails indispensable linguistic analysis. The so-called hermeneutics circle is not a single but multiple circles that exist among the author, the text, as represented by a specific language, and the reader, inspired but at the same time limited by the boundary of his or her knowledge. Here we may take note of the coexistence of both the openness and non-openness of interpretation. Interpretation is open without any presumed limits, because meaning can never be confined to what may be called the original meaning intended by the author, to the extent that we give credence to Roland Barthes' idea of the death of the author, which honors the agency of the reader. So as a reader, you are very much involved in the interpretation and meaning of the text, especially when it comes to the I Ching. You are actually part of that whole field. And this is almost like talking about quantum mechanics. Yet interpretation is also constrained because the linguistic setting and context of any text are delimited and defined by the language components of the words and sentences. What Cheng is saying here is that you can't take an interpretation in every direction that you see fit, because your interpretation should be confined and should be limited by the actual words and meanings or field of meanings that a character or sentence has. because that limits the interpretation. In view of these two dialectical dynamics, can we ever close, so to speak, the hermeneutic circle, so that we may arrive at some understanding which may be so definitive that it could exclude all other understandings? I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but anyway. It seems that the way to do so is to explore the meanings embedded within the linguistic structure of the text, especially linking the multiple meanings embedded in the text to those recorded in the exegesis and commentaries. The key method is to grasp the core meaning through careful evidential research into the Jing, the text proper, and their many zhuan, the commentaries, while bearing in mind, oh dear, here we go, that the authors of the earliest commentaries and exegesis are plausibly the most trustworthy readers of the original text. And when I read that, I thought, what the beep? Why would the earliest commentators be the most trustworthy readers of the original text? Because every commentator has its own agenda, its own motivation, and own ideas behind the commentary. So why would that make the earliest commentators the most trustworthy readers? I definitely don't agree with that, because these readers, they had different sources and different backgrounds, and that doesn't make them better readers of the original Chinese text. So I don't agree with Cheng here. For translators of the ancient Chinese classics, especially the I Ching, which is a philosophic classic, I don't agree with that either. Yeah, when you look at the 10 Wings and add that to the Zhao Yi, then you get mainly philosophical work. But disregard the 10 Wings, then you suddenly only have a divination book. So I don't regard the I Ching, or at least the Zhao Yi, as a philosophic classic. So it may not be totally effective to just distinguish variations of a character even and to locate the sound and meaning by simply checking all dictionaries. Oh, that's what I do. I check all dictionaries. Because the language of the text has more or less become a sort of symbol. The form functioning somehow like the graphic representation of a trigram or hexagram. Language is no longer just a medium of carrying or transmitting meaning, but a way of portraying a holistic worldview, wherein there are connections among not only words and sounds, but also things and beings within the heaven and the earth. So what he's actually saying is what we are seeing with this line, the fourth line of hexagram 16. We have this meaning of a hairpin, and we also have this meaning of quick, and etc. So what Cheng is actually trying to say, and I more or less agree with him, when it comes to these meanings of swift, quickly, or gather, or follow, or hairpin, which meaning is it? Well, maybe all of them, because they all seem to fit here. And maybe that is how the I Ching is supposed to work, not with one single meaning fixed to a character, but there's this whole field of meaning that of meanings plural that has to be considered when you read the text. So when you work with I Ching, I think it is best to use the multiple meanings of a Chinese character and not just one meaning. Surely when a character only has one meaning, you stick to that one meaning. But in this case, when multiple readings are possible, I wouldn't really, or at least not immediately, decide on only choosing one meaning. Okay, so maybe you're all wondering, okay, where is it going and how does Mr. Mesker translate this text, if he really needs to translate it? Well, let's look at the Chinese original and mainly at these last characters. I would translate this character Peng as friends or associates, neighboring in countries who are forming an alliance with you. That is how I would translate Peng. And this character Ge, which is really, I could make a whole presentation about that character just in the same way as I did about the character Zhan for Hairpin. But for now, let's accept the more or less traditional meaning in which it is interpreted as together, to collect. I know that the original meaning of Ge is that more or less a question word, but to me that doesn't fit this sentence. So it is my choice to read it as together, as many other authors also have done. And is Zhan a hairpin or isn't it a hairpin? To me, translating it as a hairpin doesn't fit the little bit of grammar that we have here. Because literally it says, Ping Ge Zhan, friends gather hairpin. Friends are gathering hairpins. That's also an interesting translation, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And saying that friends gather like a hairpin or hair clasp if you want, although I think that by now I've shown that hair clasp isn't really the best translation, it's a hairpin. If it meant that friends are gathering like a hairpin, I'm missing something in this sentence, because when an image is being referred to, then often the character Ru is being used, which I would have expected at the end of these sentences. If that character would have been there, it would mean that friends are gathering like a hairpin, but that character isn't in the Chinese original. So the meaning of hairpin doesn't really fit how I read this text. So I choose this option of either quickly or following. That would be my preferred translation. So friends, and that also fits the first part here. The no doubt, do not doubt Wu means, as far as I know, don't, with an exclamation mark, don't doubt. Friends will gather quickly, or they will follow you. That's also fine with me. The idea is still the same, that friends will gather around you and they will follow you, they will associate with you. So this still doesn't change the whole image of a hair clasp. The whole interpretation of the text is still the same. Friends are gathering around you, but I would not focus on this idea of a hair clasp. So anyway, I hope you found some interesting ideas in this presentation. It's always difficult for me to go through this kind of information, all these texts that I gathered in a coherent way. And if you got lost at certain points in the presentation, I can surely understand that. And that brings us back to the topic of language. Not only my language, the way I present my ideas, but also the language in the I Ching. And the language in the I Ching, as we have seen, can be very fluid, can be very flexible. And that flexibility reminds me of a very hilarious sketch from Stephen Fry and Hugh Lauren from the series A Bit of Fry and Lauren, in which there are two sketches in which they, or at least Stephen Fry, talks about language. And I'm going to end this presentation with these two clips. in which Stephen Fry talks about language, or as Hugh Lauren calls it, the elasticity of language, because the way Stephen Fry talks about language, or at least the English language, is so close to how I see the language in the I Ching. And I watched these two clips so many times, because the first time I thought, well, it's just hilarious the way he talks about language. But when you listen to it a few times, you actually realize that what he says about language and how language functions is actually very much correct. And these clips show to me how language can be used and how it should be viewed, and that language can open up so many cans of worms, and each worm carrying another can of worms. So, well, I do hope you found this presentation interesting, although probably also confusing. The idea was that I wanted to show you how difficult translating the I Ching can be. And I think that anyone who tries to go on that path on translating the I Ching and do it in the most honest way possible with the best of intentions, I think anyone who tries to do that deserves our utmost respect. Because most of the translators who start on that path, I don't think they know what they are getting into. Anyway, I want to end with this clip from Stephen Fry and Hugh Lauren, which probably might be a huge copyright infringement, but I got the clip from YouTube. It's been on there for more than 8 years. So if this video is taken down because of that, well, then I will re-upload it without the clip and just point to it on YouTube or anywhere else. So I hope you enjoyed the clip as much as I do, and happy viewing, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
So let's talk instead about flexibility of language, linguistic elasticity, if you like.
Yes, I think I said earlier that our language, English...
As spoken by us.
As we speak it, yes, certainly, defines it. We are defined by our language, if you will.
Hello, we're talking about language.
Perhaps I can illustrate my point. Let me at least try. Here's a question.
What is it?
Well, my question is this. Is our language, English, capable? Is English capable of sustaining demagoguery?
Demagoguery?
Demagoguery.
And by demagoguery you mean?
By demagoguery I mean demagoguery.
I thought so.
I mean, highly charged oratory, persuasive whipping up rhetoric. Listen to me, listen to me. If Hitler had been British, would we, under similar circumstances, have been moved, charged up, fired up by his inflammatory speeches, or would we simply have laughed? Is English too ironic to sustain Hitlerian styles? Would his language simply have rung false in our ears?
We're talking about things ringing false in our ears.
May I compartmentalise? I hate to, but may I? May I? Is our language a function of our British cynicism, tolerance, resistance to false emotion, humour, and so on? Or do those qualities come extrinsically from the language itself? It's a chicken and egg problem.
We're talking about chickens, we're talking about eggs.
Let me start a leverette here. There's language and there's speech. There's chess and there's a game of chess. Mark the difference for me. Mark it, please.
We've moved on to chess.
Imagine a piano keyboard. 88 keys, only 88, and yet hundreds of new melodies, new tunes, new harmonies are being composed upon hundreds of different keyboards every day in Dorset alone. Our language, Tiger, our language, hundreds of thousands of available words, trillions of legitimate new ideas, so that I can say the following sentence and be utterly sure that nobody has ever said it before in the history of human communication. Hold the newsreader's nose squarely, waiter, or friendly milk will countermand my trousers. Perfectly ordinary words, but never before put in that precise order. A unique child delivered of a unique mother. And yet, we all of us spend all our days saying to each other the same things time after weary time. I love you, don't go in there, get out, you have no right to say that, stop it, why should I, that hurt, help, Marjorie is dead. That surely is a thought to take out for a cream tea on a raining sunny afternoon.
So to you, language is more than just a means of communication?
Oh, of course it is, of course it is, of course it is, of course it is. Language is my mother, my father, my husband, my brother, my sister, my whore, my mistress, my checkout girl. Language is a complimentary moist lemon-scented cleansing square or handy freshen-up white pet. Language is the breath of God. Language is the dew on a fresh apple. It's the soft rain of dust that falls into a shaft of morning light as you pluck from an old bookshelf a half-forgotten book of erotic memoirs. Language is the creak on a stair. It's a spluttering match held to a frosted pane. It's a half-remembered childhood birthday party. It's the warm, wet, trusting touch of a leaking nappy, the hulk of a charred panzer, the underside of a granite boulder, the first downy growth on the upper lip of a Mediterranean girl. It's cobwebs long since overrun by an old Wellington boot.
No night.
So, in a sense, Duncan, we are left with those two. Two. None other, nary another, not one other more. We have on the one side of the gulf, the chasm, the dividing line, if you please, we have the beauty of ideas. And on the other, I don't know the other term of the equation, if that's nicer, we have the idea of beauty. Am I sensing through? Am I connecting?
We're busy discussing the idea of beauty and the beauty of ideas.
Hold a thought, Geoffrey, would you? I'm going to give you a thought. I'd like you to hold it for me. Would you do that for me, please?
I'm going to hold a thought now.
If beauty is only an idea, a form, a pattern, a template, a paradigm, an ideal, an idea, if you like, with an L, then what is the beautiful? Beauty is unattainable, but the beautiful surrounds us. We return to language, Philip. We make a return to language. That's the idea I'd like you to hold for me, if you'd be ever so splendid.
All right, well, we've made a return to language.
Listen to me, lovelet. Language circumscribes beauty, confirms, confines, limns and delineates. It colours and contains. Yet language is only a tool that we use to dig up the beauty that surrounds us and is, we take, our only and absolute real.
I'm in trouble now.
Hush, tish, vibble. I'm streaking ahead. Let me explain, expound, expand and exposit.
Would you?
I find you beautiful, but you are not beauty.
Whoops.
Therefore, you contain a property of beauty. Therefore, the substance of which you exhibit a property must exist. Where is it? That is language's task. Who was it who said, my language is the universal whore that I must make into a virgin? Who was it?
Kate Adie?
I think it was Karl Kraus, but it needn't have been. It needn't have been. Now, Tommy, it's time to ask you to give back to me the thought that I bade you hold.
I was holding the thought that we'd made a return to language.
Correctly, Correctington. Language pursues beauty, harries it, hounds it, courses it across the rough lands of inquiry, and in so doing can itself be beautiful. Ripple on ripple, image on image, wheel within a wheel, like the circles that we find in the windmills of our mind.
Noel Harrison.
Noel, as you so rightly Harrison. Now, language can be beautiful, and Madeline asleep in lap of legends old, plenitude, dishes, martyr, breasts, tumble, emolument, forage, smitten, plenum, vulva. Words that have their own sonority and beauty, which is extrinsic to their connotational or denotational referends.
I think he said vulva.
So, Timothy, I'll leave you with a thought, a breath, a fruit that drops from the boughs of my imaginings. Think beauty, but be beautiful. Say beauty, but say it beautifully. Beauty is duty and duty beauty, so there. Good night. I don't feel quite so well now.